Welcome. The following is a sermon presented at First Love Church in Ocala, Florida. If you'd like to know more about our church or Pastors Dennis and Heather Drake, you can find us on the web at firstlovechurch.org.
Is when it's not raining, the best time to make the bridge is when you don't need it and able to cross this great divide or this cavern. And so we want to encourage you tonight to look to the practicality of the tools that we're offering. The research that we are using for this particular event is from the Gottman Institute. If you haven't availed yourself to their information, we really encourage you to do that. They have books and podcasts, or they're guests on podcasts, and they have information on videos and on even YouTube. And what's significant about this particular research is that it's a longitudinal study, and it has been over 30 years they have been tracking these same couples. And so they're really able to give the scope of what makes a couple be able to thrive, not just survive, not just we've made it to 50 years but we can't stand each other, but this idea of, are we friends? Do we have the same purposes? Are we living a life that matters, and do we enjoy each other's company? And those are the type of things that we want to talk about tonight. In particular, we want to talk about a couple of the tools, but that's been something that has been the theme of this particular endeavor, this marriage enrichment.
I would interject that the goal would be that if you were doing well, that's probably the best time to add some tools to the toolbox. But even if you're not, even if you're in the middle of a really hard time right now, it just takes a little more time and it's a little more difficult. But it's not that God won't use the information and your willingness. And there was something that we were just talking about recently too. And I think that a lot of times people feel like the only way things are going to change is if both people are on board and both people see it my way. That never happens. But the reality is, and the studies are in, that the truth of the matter is it really only takes one person who's willing to work. And I know that that's not human nature, because if I'm going to work, rest God, you're going to do something too. But what happens is, that machine, as it's functioning one way, once one person begins to do something different, it will change the trajectory of that relationship and the way that we're going. And so imagine if two people are working, how much quickly, and then of course that would be the goal, but you don't have to wait until your spouse sees things exactly the way you see it before you're going to make any progress. In fact, studies have proven that the opposite is true, that if even one person will engage. And so tonight, a lot of times when I hear information, I want to poke Heather and say, did you get that? That's good for you.
Taking notes. Are you paying attention?
You should be changing in that area. And so I think that can kind of free us up to really realize that as long as we're willing to adapt and apply some of these things, that we can be guaranteed to see change in our relationship.
But we're also expecting it to be very practical. Catherine was doing the Facebook banner for us for the marriage enrichment, and so she said, what is this about? And I said, it's a marriage enrichment. And so she chose, I think it was very clever, but it's 2 hands, and it's a watch, and it's 2 wedding rings. And I really saw a picture in my mind that was a little different. It's filthy, dirty fingernails over the top of a cliff, and all you see is someone holding on. Sometimes that's what marriage feels like too, like this huge effort toward doing these things. And so I think both pictures
I didn't realize you felt that way. Let's discuss.
and here's the hope for us in a marriage that's a long time. There are patterns and seasons, and I'm so grateful that you're here tonight, because we're endeavoring to have more of those times where we're just the picture of sitting next to each other holding hands. But I think marriage is a lot of work, and I think that people forget to tell us that. When you type marriage pictures into the Unsplash or into the Google or into those things, they're only the pictures of the wedding, and I want to tell you, the wedding only lasted that few hours. There's a marriage that lasts a whole lifetime, and we need more preparation and more tools and more help in what it means to be married together.
And I think about couples will spend 6 months planning a wedding, but then they have no plans
For how to be married.
For being married. And I want to tell you that we want to talk about a couple of those things tonight, because there are things that you can map out in your relationship that will absolutely make an impact. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think that's very important that you discuss what's the kind of marriage that you want to have? You know, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Did you know that? That is a guarantee. Aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. So we want to not have nothing, but we want to have something. So what would be, and I think that's really a fun conversation to have, as long as it's not, well, my goal is for you to change. But if we really talk about, you know, Heather and I talk a lot now at 51 and 40 something. We talk about
49.
We talk about what kind of grandparents we want to be. You know, that's like the next thing on the horizon. And so we talk about, well, let's make sure that we don't burden ourselves down with a bunch of debt and a bunch of bills so that we've got to stay working all the time and can't, like, you know, go spend time with the grandkids once they come, you know. So I think that, you know, her and I talk, and that's good to find out we're on the same page with that. And have discussions, because I might say, well, I want to live in a van down by the river.
No, brothers and sisters, no, it's not happening.
We need to have some conversations because we're headed a couple different directions here. Let's get on the same page.
I like that you said that, but just no, we're not living in a van. Well, we could travel in a van, but it's going to have to be short verse. We're not living in a van by the river.
Duly noted.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, dear.
So one of the things that the Gottman Institute talks about is this idea of love maps. And they said for a relationship really and it's not just marriage relationships, it's every relationship that you have intentionally invested in, that they should have a love map. And I had never really even heard of love maps before the Gottman Institute, and so I've done a lot of research on it, and I was spending some time doing some drawings and actually writing out some notes for this thing, and Silas asks, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm drawing up love maps, and he looked at me and said, is there going to be buried treasure? And I was like, yes, because we're all pirates, and that's what we always think about. Really, this idea that there is buried treasure when we can find a map, or there is a destination, or there is a home that we're headed toward. But the Gottman Institute has this idea, and they have the research behind it, that a person or a couple who is vested in each other has already made, and maybe you've already made them and are not aware of them, but the idea is that you would intentionally make a love map of your spouse's inner world. Really what that means, years ago, Dennis was doing stand-up comedy, and he came across a technique that's really, really old called Memory Palace. Why don't you talk about Memory Palace for a moment?
Yeah, because the way Memory Palace works is that, like all of you right now, can you think, in your imagination, can you think of a childhood home that you lived in for a long time when you were young? Can you picture that in your mind right now? Can you, like, see the kitchen? You can probably see the chairs. If I'm asking you, where's the table? Where's the cabinet? Where's the stove? Where's the fridge? You went to it just then. Well, Memory Palace knows that you have those, utilizes that. You know that where that stove is. So in your mind, on the stove, you can hang a thought. And that's how people can memorize, 20, 30, 40 digit numbers. Because then on that stove, you imagine whatever digit that is or whatever memory that you want to hold on to. You imagine it setting on the stove and with something silly. Maybe somebody lit it on fire or your favorite comedian is doing something with it. So you just come up with something silly on that stove, and then anytime you ever think of your Memory Palace, you could go to the stove and remember that digit because you've hung that memory on that. You can go around that whole room. You can go around your whole yard. So literally you could remember, and from that technique you can remember thousands of things. And it's with that little bit of intention that you begin to memorize things, and so you're using that map in your brain. Well, what if you took the same care for the people that you care about? And it doesn't have to be marriage relationship. It ought to be. Oh God, it ought to be. But in any relationship, when you listen to something, I have Phil and Sarah are friends of mine. At some point, Phil picked up the fact that I like guitars. I don't know how he figured that out.
He's an investigator.
He must be some kind of investigative genius. If you go to my house, there's 40 guitars hanging on the wall. So this investigative genius figured that out. So they invited us out to dinner a little while back. I think it was for our birthday, in fact. And because our birthdays are 6 days apart, so they got a twofer. Good move on your part. And when we went to Gainesville, they said, we want to stop somewhere. And right before the dinner, we stopped, and there was an exhibit for guitars. All these rare and collectible guitars. And he said, well, I heard about this, and I thought that you would enjoy that. See, that's someone who took a memory map, and thought, this person is interested in this. I know about that, so I will hang a memory on that. I won't just forget. What's your spouse's favorite flowers? I don't know. I'm all proud because I can say hydrangea. I know that after 28 years. I'm a genius, right? And then the other day somebody said, well, what color? And I'm like, I hate it. So we all need work on this, but what if we listened? In our work relationships with our children, and it takes a lot more effort than just waiting until the other person stops talking so you can make the point that you wanted to make in the first place, right?
So these emotionally intelligent people that are part of the Gottman research that they have mapped for this very long period of time really had a richly detailed love map of their partner's interior world. The things that they liked, the things that they didn't like, the things that made them anxious, the things that caused them to boil, the things that and we'll talk about many of those things tonight, but this idea is that when we are stuck or when we are suffering or when we are overwhelmed, that we know how to come for our partner. We know how to stand in places where we can be part of the rescue, or we can at least be part of the support and a part of the comfort. And so understanding this idea of love map is really where you store all the important and even not so important details about your partner's inner life.
But it's not so much just like, I know what flowers they are. For my wife, sadly, the story has been for her that by her father, she wasn't chosen. That he chose the addiction that he got in the Vietnam War. And so he chose heroin, and then when heroin wasn't available, he chose alcohol, and when that wasn't available, whatever, prescription drugs, and finally how it destroyed and ended his life. Well, if that's the message that's always been sent to my wife, then I need to key in when something triggers that. Somebody chooses to not spend time with her, or maybe chooses another church because we pastor, let's talk real, then if I've mapped that out, then I know enough to know, well, now's not the time for us to address certain issues, or now it would be the time for me just to bring comfort and show her that I choose her time and time again. Amen? And so we can reinforce what the enemy is trying to unravel, but we have to be willing, and many of you do, I'm sure intuitively, you all do it to a degree, but I really think coming away from this meeting tonight could be transformative.
And you could be really effective in intentionally, cognitively making room for your partner's interior life, for you to really understand, pay attention to listen, and with intention say, I'm making a map to your heart. I'm making a map so that we have a life together where we are both thriving. In this situation, it doesn't mean that you become enmeshed or codependent. It doesn't mean that in every situation we have to go now live in that person's childhood home that they needed to be rescued from or that they've outgrown, but that you're aware of why a person believes a certain thing, what's important to them, why it's important to them. And I think one of the things that we do often, instead of really getting curious about each other, is we dismiss it. Because it's like, well, that's no big deal. I mean, if we want to talk pain, let's talk pain. And now let's compare pain and who has more pain and whose pain was greater or longer. And instead of going, I'm curious to why this is such a big deal to you. I'm interested to know what happened and why you're so particular about cutting the bread that way. I mean, have you had these kind of things in your house? I mean, we're all working together and all of a sudden someone goes, don't do it like that. And you're like, oh, what just happened? We just escalated. And then, then we get defensive. And then we start, instead of going, I'm just wondering why that's important to you, how this is cut. But a lot of times we don't take that moment to go, I wonder where this came from. And then to have that map, to be able to say, this is a really big deal to my spouse, and now I'm not just going to let anyone come in there and cut any old way. I'll make sure that I bring some protection, or I offer to have that done in a way that is helpful or supportive. And maybe you don't have an issue with cutting bread, I don't either, but that seemed very safe to talk about that.
Not to take too much of a rabbit trail,
Yeah.
but I think that you hit upon something too, because how you begin a conflict is going to indicate
How it's
pretty
gonna
much
end.
how it ends, you know? And so really asking that question, when you see disproportionate emotions and anger, oftentimes we want to match those. You know, that's offensive. You know, you escalated, so I'm going to escalate higher. You know, and that's kind of the way we were trained. And how well has that been working for anyone at any time ever in the world, ever? You know, but if you can ask the question, step back away from that and say, wow, you know, how I'm going to now, the next words out of my mouth are going to dictate how this thing is going to go. You know, what's your problem? That's aggressive, you know. But wow, that really brought some emotion out of you. Help me understand why that triggered that pusher. You know, sweetheart, can you tell me more? You know, that's a different thing than you need to watch how you talk to me. Last person to talk to me, you know, walked away with a limp. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, that next, you know, in response and entering in to that conflict, how you enter into it is going to determine how it comes out. And really, it would be very easy for someone who was de-escalated by a question like that, like, help me understand what happened. Well, that reminded me of...
I like this particular rabbit hole because we're all going to have conflict. I mean, marriage is going to have conflict. But how we engage in conflict...
You know, just to say this, I want to interject your interjecting.
Okay, do it.
that it's not that you're not going to have conflict. And so the success of a marriage isn't that you don't have conflict, because most marriages that don't have any conflict really don't have any kind of a marriage, because they just avoid. So it's not that you won't have conflict, but it will be how you have that, and if you can have it successfully, which, you know, which you actually can, believe that or not.
Yeah, the outcome is that we would understand each other better, and that we would make choices that would be more supportive toward what the common goal is. And so really understanding that conflict, though, doesn't have to be World War III every single time. You know, that we can actually have an end result where we can understand each other better. But that requires us to not go into conflict with blame. Not go into conflict, because if you're going to blame someone, what their response is always going to be defensive, and in defense, we're only going to fight or we're going to flee, and so you know, we're just going to keep repeating over and over again. But you know, the truth of it,
that's unbelievable.
You know, when you're defending yourself, there is that fight or flight kind of thing, and that wasn't what you intended. You don't want to run somebody out or have a fight with somebody. You needed something explained or needed further information on something. So it's really important to make sure that the words that we use are not full of blame. I would also offer this. It's not Gottman Institute, but it is my personal history and in understanding this. I think that sarcasm doesn't belong in conflict. I think that it escalates conflict, and a lot of times it's
half of my skill set.
A lot of times that's what lots of people go to, and it's not helpful. It's not it becomes a way of defense. But if we've gone into it with blame, there's something completely different with coming into a conflict and asking for some clarity, or how we can resolve this, or what a person really meant. Did I hear you? Did I understand you to say this? Is this what you want changed? Is this what's not working? Those are very different questions than what's wrong with you. Just calm down. Which in the history of people has never helped. Telling someone to calm down. Being able to say to someone, this is really making you upset. How can I help? Or what can we talk about? Or there's this intention of conflict doesn't have to destroy a marriage, especially if you know where the inner maps are. I think sometimes in the inner maps too, we need to know about our interior, that we have done lots of renovation probably in our growth in our life of the way that we live now in our maturity, but there are some foundational things that happen to us as children that we process the world through. There are some things, not just in children, but as we age, there's longer periods of time that we have actually had maybe other spouses, or we've had work experiences and career failures and maybe career successes, but children have come and gone and friends have come and gone. And all these things are part of the foundation of the marriage that we are having. And so being really aware of that conflict can be a good thing. It can be something that really produces for us, if we're careful, we can know what step to walk in. I grew up in a house up north that had wooden staircase, and there were lots of them. And we also knew that if you stepped on the one staircase on the right-hand side in this way, it made a horrible noise. But you didn't have to step on that part. You could just step on the other part, and it was perfectly fine, like everything else. I think sometimes in our lives we can know, and not in a way that's avoidance, but I don't need to cause pain for the groan of my way to be on that particular stair. I can make an avoidance, and I can change this. And so love mapping is really this idea that I'm paying attention to someone else's heart, but it can also be that I don't have to continue to inflict pain or to re-traumatize someone by behaving in the same way that someone else has experienced great grief.
I have, like most of you, experienced conflict as only being negative. Like, I didn't say anything, I held my tongue until I blew up, and it was awful. But I want to present to you the idea that you really can enter into conflict with a different way, with a different set of rules. And if you agree upon them and will discipline yourself that no matter how bad you're hurt or how you feel, that you're not going to cross certain boundaries, then you can actually find that conflict just brings you to a closer, deeper place and will bring actual, literal resolution. But it does have to, sometimes people have to, it be mirrored back to them how much accusation is in their words, and how much, that there's anger and accusing and sarcasm in the way that they respond to the person. Now, I'm not saying that you change your personality, because some of you probably have masters or at least bachelors in sarcasm. And so that's part of your charm, and we're not asking you to change who you are. But also understand that in a love map, I'm going to be delicate. I'm going to walk around somebody. I'm going to care for them in a way. And sometimes...
Can I tell this story? I'm going to tell the story because it's my story. It involves Dennis, and it makes him look bad, but it's still my story, so I'm going to tell it.
Well,
let's tell it. I'm going to tell it. Let me tell you about how we didn't
know
about love mapping, and we didn't really know each other very well. We went off to Bible school. We had just married, and this is the second year, and Thomas was born, and we were going to Bible school together with this tiny baby, and we were both working 40 hours a week. So you can imagine what our world was like, having a tiny baby without any kind of help from friends or family. We were just doing everything, and Dennis was working a job that required him to work shift night overnight and not be home. And so it was just kind of craziness, and we were at school. And I'm good at school. I've liked school. School is good for me. I mean, if you wanted to say to me, like, let's set up a day and let's get up super early, like at 5 a.m., and let's make coffee and let's learn all day. Let's not even talk to each other, but let's get lots of books and let's spend the day reading and learning, and that would be so exciting for me. But I want to tell you that's not what is exciting for Dennis.
No.
I've learned this. I don't even have to love map it, but I'm just saying that's who it is for me. So I'm good at school. So I go to school, and in school I'm trying to get good grades, and I'm trying to really pay attention, because the school that we're going through is not just for any old things. It's for the life work that we are going to do, and it's about people's hearts, and it's about kingdom work. So it feels very heady, and it feels very responsible. And the teacher said to us, this is very important and tells you a lot about my interior thing, that everybody with the name, the last name that is the letter L and under will have your test on Friday. And everybody L and over, you'll have your test on Tuesday. That's good. I need to know when I'm going to prepare. I'm not going to prepare until the night. Well, that is how it's also going to be for me. I'm going to do it well, but it's going to be the night before. And so we get to class, we start the beginning of the week, and the teacher said, yeah, I didn't mean that, I'm changing it all up. Well, I just want to tell you, brothers and sisters, that I am horrified, because I'm not prepared for this test. It's a puppeting test. I'm not good at puppets. We recorded it, we were going to do this whole big thing, and it's a live performance. And there's lots of people watching, and my puppeting is horrible. like so bad. I'm standing behind the curtain. I have a tiny baby who is being watched. I have to go to work later today, and I am weeping because I'm doing such a bad job. I am weeping. This is so terrible for me. I was told that this wasn't until next week, and now I'm doing this unprepared. I am traumatized.
Yeah, but you got to understand my perspective, because I'm actually
No,
helping
you don't
her
have to understand.
well, I just want to say
Yeah,
in my perspective, I'm standing next to her as she's having this meltdown behind the curtain, because I was doing the other puppet in the skit, and I'm watching her, because there's a thing called proper puppet height.
Which is part of her schooling.
And so you have
Your
to have your
elbows
puppet
up,
but
not
she's crying, and
slinking
so her
down
puppet's
because-
sagging, and she's crying, and I think
Because
the
I
whole thing is
wasn't
hysterical.
ready.
And
I
I'm
could
going-
do this
I'm going,
so
puppet
well.
height, and I am just laughing because I can't believe anyone would
I am
freak
crying,
out over
and he
puppets.
is laughing.
But for me, I mean, if I got a C, I used to write my family. Can you believe it? And so her, if anything less than a perfect score, and so now she's got puppet
It was
height.
so
Her
bad.
mouth
It
was like,
was
I'm like,
so
move your
bad.
mouth, and then she'd move the puppet mouth, and then the conversation
But
would
I'm
stop,
really
and the
good
mouth
at
would
this
keep
later,
going.
but I wasn't
So I'm
prepared
like,
for
this
this.
whole thing is slaying
It was
me.
so bad. He started calling me Jim Henson. Like, hi, but I'm just telling you, brothers, this is not helpful to me. But these are the kind of things we started with in this understanding of, if you could know, though, about me, how important it is to do good on the test. And I would have studied. And had it been given on the day the teacher said, I would have gotten a 100. Because I turned in my script, I got a 100. My execution was horrible because I didn't practice that. But so there's
But
this
a love
idea
math
for
lesson,
you.
fast forward to now, I know better than to
We
the,
just
the
avoid
perfectionist.
puppets.
when you don't do well at puppets, don't call her Jim Henson. Duly noted. And there's really just that how we respond in those situations, because again, it might be funny to you, and in that scenario,
it was
but
to
I mean,
you.
she's having a literal. I've never seen this meltdown from her before. We were just married, and
Well,
to
2
me,
years,
the whole
but
thing
still.
is amusing. It's like,
Still big
it's the
deal.
one bad grade. I mean, my whole life I've gotten bad grades. You get over it.
No
I mean,
bad
really.
grades. No
Trust
bad
me,
grades.
It's no big deal.
Except
if it
in
bothered you,
puppeting.
I'd be dead now. So really, it's going to be okay.
But let me tell you how that's not helpful to someone who really feels the shame of not being excellent at everything. And there's this hope for us in really understanding each other's and paying attention to what happens. I'm able to tell you now, I can look at puppets and I'm not traumatized by them. But there's a hope for us.
No, it's generational, because our
It
kids,
is. Our
when we
kids
would
hate
take them to Disney to the puppet thing, they would
No.
they would get frightened. So I think it's generationally got in somehow. There's a
So our kids are
We
so
need
afraid.
deliverance
They're
from
okay
the
now.
fear of
They're okay now as adults, but when they were young, they were
were.
so
They hated
afraid. Yeah, but because puppets can be traumatizing, I think that's what happened.
I think that's the moral of the story.
I think that
No, it's not.
we're on a
But
rabbit trail
What I
here.
wanted to say was just really, if you can have somebody maybe help mirror back to you how that sounds, because calling someone Jim Henson might sound funny to you, but for the person to be able to say to you, that hurts when, even the accusing words, like, can you hear yourself? Because I've had people, and I repeat back what they said. Did you hear? And we're saying don't accuse. It's almost like your language is so built in with accusation that you need somehow for that to mirror back to you, for you to hear that if you could take that out, it will make a huge difference. I remember telling one lady, instead of being so, accusing with your words, why don't you just say, I feel? And she goes, okay. And she looked at her husband. This was in a counseling appointment at the pastor's house. She goes, okay, I feel like he's an asshole. I said,
That you've missed the point.
yeah, you have definitely missed the point, dear. But they're really within us. Our way of fighting and our way of communication is so aggressive. But what I was trying to get her to say was, I feel hurt by your behavior. But still, that accusational language is so woven in to how we communicate. And I'm telling you, it's such a big part of how you're received and how you're heard, because immediately with that, it's go time. I mean, ding, 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 we're stepping into the ring with talk like that. And is that what you wanted? And how has that been working for us in our relationships? It's aggressive, it's hurtful. And so we can find a different language, but you might need a peer even to help you mirror back to you, because you're saying you don't want to be aggressive, but can I tell you that was just very aggressive, what you just said? Am I making sense?
I think so. And I think that what we're hoping for, and this is what's happened for us, in the process of paying attention to each other's inner workings, now when there's a big test or there's something that I have to do that has required study and I'm presenting for, Dennis doesn't call me names or say, how are you doing on that? But there's this idea of going, what can I do to try to help you make space for all the study that you will have to do for this, and then even afterwards checking in and saying, I know that could have produced anxiety or could have given you some heart palpitations, and how are you feeling about that? Coming back and checking in on someone, paying attention to, hey, this could have hurt. How is that working for you? And what does that look like for us to even recognize the support that's needed in the relationships that we have that kind of spin out of our marriage? What is it like with our in-laws? What is it like to have this interaction with, adult children or even neighbors or coworkers that know us all really well, and paying attention to what each of us have to offer when we say, I'm making a mental note, not a list of things that someone does wrong, but being able to say, this could cause hurt, or this could cause anxiety, or this could cause worry, and what can we do to support that?
Well, you navigate someone in their map, their world in a way where like, for example, I alluded to this, and Heather just mentioned it. She's going to probably prepare the night before the last minute that I would judge, And so for years, I used to call her Procrasti-Heather. Now,
which is another very helpful,
was a
wonderful
huge
name.
blessing and helped a lot.
It always helps people when you call them names.
In my sense of humor, I thought that the joke would imply, you procrastinate, you wait long, and then with my great advice, she would go, and change her personality, because the goal of any relationship, right, is if you talk that person to be more like you, everyone will be
No,
happy,
that is
right?
not the goal.
Oh, wait, no,
that is not the
at all.
goal.
But many of us do that, and let's be honest. And so for me, saying little sarcastic things and that was how I dealt with that information that I had, that map that I had before. And it's been only later in life when I realized that kind of thing isn't working, and it is not my goal to change her personality, but to enjoy my time with this unique person that God has given me. So in that situation now, instead of sarcasm and saying, well, you should have taken more time last week, how about if I take the kids to the movies, or take them out to eat, or remove them from the situation so she can have the next 4 hours to study and do the way she likes to do that. Imagine that love map would actually cause me to behave differently. Instead of me just sitting and judging, oh, that's how she does it. Oh, she's getting ready to run off the cliff there. No, there's something I can do. And even like if it is something that you would judge as negative, because I still believe it'd probably be better if a week in advance she got some of the stuff done. But after 28 years of marriage, maybe this is the way she's going to approach these things. And she seems to pull them off, too, because I keep waiting for the shoe to drop. And,
sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it produces stress. But here, a lot of times it produces anxiety. But here's where a marriage is different than any other friendship, where you know that and you can say, how can I support? What can I do?
Right.
And even if it is just in the decompression after someone has careened off the cliff, or after somebody has crashed and burned, what can I do to be with you? And pay attention to you while this is actually happening. And what I love about the idea of the love maps, though, is it's actually really fun to make those maps. And how we do that is actually have conversations. And there are some really specific conversations that we have. Tonight before you leave, if you leave us your email on a little card, we can mail you the 20 that the Gottman Institute has come up with. But there are many, many other ones, and many people have understood this idea and have lots of ideas about what the conversation could actually look like that could help us make these kind of maps.
And it really is just kind of a conversation, a questioning. What if what if your spouse did like guitars and you weren't interested, but still to ask the question, well, what's your favorite kind of guitar? What's that? What's your, I'm not into flowers. I used to deliver flowers when I was a kid. They would just tip over and water would leak in the back of the van. That's my experience with flowers. Or I'd try to grow something in the house and it would die. So that for me is not something I'm intuitively going to ask about. But if I can ask her, what is that favorite flower? And moreover, what's the favorite color? We begin to learn how to ask those questions. It transitions so much deeper, so quickly, into learning to ask the important questions about why do you feel that way about, the children.
And some of the questions would be like, what is your, fondest, most unrealized dream? What do you want to do? I mean, what if there was no thing that actually stopped us, what would you love to do with your life? Having questions like that, what produces the greatest anxiety for you right now? What is something that you're working through that is causing you worry? Those kind of
Instead
questions
of thinking
are.
yourself, well, I can't wait till it's my turn, I'm going to say, if you can then listen to that and go, well, you know what, I can do something about that.
What is my greatest fear? What is the disaster scenario? Those are really important ones to know, because sometimes you end up getting in a situation where it seems no big deal to you, but to someone else, it really matters. And in ways like that, we can unintentionally diminish our partner, or we can unintentionally wound someone when we're not aware of what happened. So taking time, I think that we should be really aware that people are worth an investment, marriage is worth an investment, and we should go slow. I mean, there's a lot of times where we just want to say what we want to say. We're not listening. We're not slowing down. There's not this stillness and this practice of, I'm here to intentionally engage with you. I think one of the things that's important to me, and this would be in my particular love map, but I love a vacation with no agenda. I love a vacation. And vacations can be a place of great stress, because just in themselves, you're moving all kinds of comfort. You're moving all kinds of things, regular things that you depend on, that you know about. And so even in times of travel, though it's wonderful and adventuresome, it can produce stress. But this idea then of knowing how we can be supportive to each other, what we can lend in these kind of things, and asking the question, what would be the worst case scenario on this vacation? And knowing that ahead of time, knowing what kind of, but for me, I like the idea that we on vacation could come up spontaneous by the seat of our pants. We could have a vacation that's not regimented. And I have a friend that would make her want to throw up. If we didn't plan something, she would want to vomit. And so when we travel with her from morn till night, it is like an itinerary that has been printed out, at 0600 hours, this is when it's going to come till we're sleeping at night. And that brings her a lot of safety, and that brings her a lot of peace. And so in being her friend and knowing that we're going to travel with that, we know and so we know ahead of time, that's what we're getting into. We love her and we want to be a part of that. So we make those adjustments. And so in that same way, paying attention to your spouse's inner workings and going, what would be the worst thing that could happen on this vacation? What's the best thing that could happen? And how do we kind of navigate the middle of this? And it's not all about vacations, but about the job that we're applying for, about really wondering, what are your coworkers like? What is it like for you to experience going to work in that office? How are you treated? How are you respected? How are you ignored? What are the good ideas that you've presented that someone has sloughed off? These are the kind of things that really build intimacy and really build intentional emotional intelligence.
And I'm thinking too in the family, like how much it impacts when you know that map and you can navigate that a little easier. So I did a thing with our kids that's probably not a good parenting thing. I'm sure somebody somewhere along has written that this is not good. But I would always say, Thomas, you like me better than your mom, right?
This is bad.
And he'd be like, no way, I like mom way better. I mean, you think about it though, And then when it got to Dave, he wouldn't choose. That's his personality. I like you both equal. And I'm talking about a little baby because I'm trying to goad him in just for fun. Well, this last one, Silas, I call him the last one, Jesus' name, but but Silas will get on board, man.
Oh my God, he's the best provocateur.
And it's whatever
he
wants to do. Like,
yeah.
you know who I love best? Sorry, Dad. I love Mom. Or once in a while he'll go, Mom, you don't check the boxes. It's Dad. So he does this thing, and he's just teasing us, and he giggles and he just thinks it's the funniest thing in the world. But we all know who he loves best, because like when we left tonight, he was like, oh, mommy, I love you, bye. And he didn't care. I walked out of the house or whatever. But he'll say, that he loves. But I settled that to say this, that like he'll go, Dad, I love you best. But it's because I just took him to a movie in Twisty Treat. And so I'll say to Heather, what do you think about that? And she goes, because of the way I was raised with my dad being gone, when I see the kids love you and you love them back, you have no idea what that does to my mom heart. I don't know what it's like to be a mom. I don't know what it's like to be her. But when I key in to the bids for connection that she offers, and we want to talk about that too. When someone offers you that bid for connection, you have to be smart enough to pick up on that and listen.
We talked about that at one of the earlier episodes, but this idea of when your partner offers, hey, look at that sunset.
And so for me to be able to know that that's something that when I love that little boy, that my wife isn't jealous of that, that just fulfills or completes something in her, that she thinks to herself, I wish that my dad would have came back from Vietnam and would have just cuddled with us or wrestled or taken us to Twisty Treat. And so those times when I do that for them, as much as I do that for them, because I'm aware of her mapping, I do that for her as well. And so, you can emphasize and you can capitalize on those things that are within our family dynamic already if we're taking more time to observe and to listen than we are to try to make sure that our needs are being met. And that is just a carnal, selfish thing that we do. We want to make sure, hey, I'm in this relationship. Is it going to meet all of my needs? Well, last time I checked, it wasn't all about you. And if we could really, connect with that place of serving this other person, I promise you, God will stir in their heart and the things that you desperately have need of, He'll take care of, whether He uses that person or not.
Silas and I drink tea together. I drink coffee, and he wants that, and I'm not willing to share. I don't really believe there'll be other things like, he can't have it, but I'm not willing to share coffee, but I'll share tea. And so he comes and he'll sit down even tonight with a mug of mint tea, and he'll say, let's have a conversation. And I'm like, let's have a conversation. And he goes, I don't mean to offend. And he's got his little mug of mint tea. But I love your husband more than I love you. And he takes a little sip of his tea. And then he goes, let's talk about how great he is. and so we talk about how great he is. And then he goes, and it's not in a way that I mean to offend you, but he's just way better than you are. And he whispers these kind of things. And I was thinking, though, what if all the time, all of us in our love mapping, we rehearsed all the really great things about our spouses? Because really what happens is we rehearse the pain that we're in, and we're not paying attention to that, and all of a sudden the pain that we're in is isolating, and it causes us to turn into ourselves instead of being able to reach out for help. I remember one of the things that happened for me when somebody really paid attention and knew a love map is a lot of times in pain we go back into places of self-soothing that and that's a really important question you should ask your spouse. What soothes you? What comforts you in distress? What brings you peace when you feel very anxious? And I was in a situation that I had a lot of anxiety about, and somebody who really knew me said, this could be really overwhelming for you. What can I do to make sure that you stay in the present? What can I do to make you stay right here where it is safe? Because very much of our time we dwell in the painful past or the fearful future, and we miss the actual present that's right here. And by paying attention to someone's love map, we can remind them, hey, you don't have to go to that other place. You can stay right here where it is safe, where there is grace, where there are people who will help, or where there are tools that we can use so that you can kind of overcome or stop playing the same tapes that play over and over again. We can do a pattern interrupt when we really know someone's life, when we know what pattern to stick in the spoke.
I don't want to bore you with our stories, but we are 50-year-old people with a 6-year-old kid, so you're just stuck with us telling all of our stories about our little kid. But the thing is, when he can tease like that, a lot of times he'll be like, check this out, Dad, I'm kissing your wife. And he'll just he just messes with me and stuff like that. But he's able to do that because he knows he's loved, and that's a safe environment for him to kind of be vulnerable and to tease a little bit. But if he was in a fearful place for love, he wouldn't be able to make any of those kind of jokes because there's a fear of. And so I want you to understand something that really in the greater context of this is if we can create a safe environment, we can be more vulnerable and share the truth with each other. And actually, don't you want to create that for your spouse, a place where they're really safe to just, he is so safe that he can just kid us about something like that, you know? A 6-year-old guy can just be comfortable of knowing that he's not going to say something and then his mother or his father's going to retract our love because of something that he said. I mean, I literally called him from New York City. He goes, I'm in bed with your wife. And he's just too much, you know? And, but he knows that I'm just going to go, what? When I get home, but when I get home, he just jumps in my arms, and there's that place of love. And I want that for us in all of our relationships. And I think that we can have that childlike safety if when we are vulnerable with each other, that we don't make the other person pay for that.
So there was this 15th century philosopher who talked about parenting, and he said that all children need is a good enough parent. And the person who was studying underneath them said, well, we'll need you to qualify what a good enough parent is. And this person described a good enough parent by, a parent is someone who can take all the rage a child can give him and will not retaliate and will not abandon.
Yeah,
but what is the hope for that in saying, how do we care for the inner child of our spouse? Can we receive all of the rage without retaliation or abandonment? And can we find a way to bring that to a healthy place? I mean, it's not just in parenting, but what do we do to recognize that we all have this inner working, this inner sanctuary, this inner home that we often live out of? And what do we do to build this new life, to build this new home, so that we are no longer living in places where we have in the past, but we're building a future together that has a lot of bright hope?
Christ is our example, and you know that he doesn't respond to your behavior with anger or isolation, rejection, separation, you know? And so if we could truly parent that way, and it's a great theory, but when the rubber meets the road and those kids, you know, they come at you, it's so easy to come back with anger, or if I'm not going to do the anger, then it's isolation. I just, you know, close the door, you get out. And so, you know, I really hear that as from heaven, and I hope that you do today on any situation you have in terms of parenting. I mean, your natural response, that's age-old truth. It's going to be anger or isolation. And so if we can meet with whatever intensity they bring to us and not respond in that way, you know what?
Or
God will
abandon
use
them.
that. And in our relationships as well, you know that's how Christ treats us. And so whatever your spouse can bring to you, can you have a broad enough shoulders to bear it and not have to retaliate? Or if not retaliate with your anger, then remove yourself as a punishment. You know, if we could really meet with that place, I'm going to tell you, you'll have victory in your relationship. You will stand the test of time. And that's what we want to do. We want to be able to, in all of our relationships, really be able to stand the test of time.
And not just to stay together for the sake of staying together, but to really thrive as individuals, to really flourish, to really join God in the renewal of all things. There's a couple of questions that we want to just throw out there for you to be thinking about. Like, because you'll have a car ride home and you'll talk about the love mapping, but there's a few of them like that I thought that were really brilliant, and some of them you may not know. Things like, did you have a nickname? Or I hope that you know that about each other. But one of them is like, do you prefer hugs or gifts when I say thank you? I mean, how do you really express thank you? What do you need to do when you feel hurt? How do you soothe? What song reminds you of our relationship? And I do need to tell you that the maps need to be updated. Dennis said something to me recently, and he said, I know you like this. And I said, I haven't liked that for about 25 years. I mean, yes, you got that information when we first got together, but I'm a different person now. Yeah. So we need to pay attention to updating some of the maps. It's like those GPS maps need to be updated, and we need to have further conversation. Like, is this health issue still a worry for you? Is this scenario that was overwhelming, does that still have that same place in your heart? Or is there something else? And so, you know, asking a question of where would you go if you just needed time to think? If you could create a space that would just allow you to flourish and have creative thoughts, what would that space look like? And for many of us, no one has asked us, so we didn't know to ask the question, but really asking the question can open to us a beautiful opportunity for us to serve each other in love, for us to intentionally say, this is where I can hang my hat, asking the questions and paying attention to the answers, not asking the questions to interrogate, but asking the questions so that I can have mapping.
Hopefully some follow through. I know with my wife, I know the answer to the question. One of the things that really refresh and comfort her, we've got a garden tub in the bathroom, and she likes to light candles, read a book, or listen to a podcast or something, and sitting there with the lights dim, And so for me to now have to play goalie, because if a 6-year-old finds out there's a bath being drawn, he thinks it's swim time. And so I literally got to, distract him. Is that water running? No, honey. It's, and I keep him out here, and I'm doing tricks or whatever. And so it might take me an hour or two of literal effort and work to distract him. But, and not that she begrudges him to come in there, but it does take away from that moment of time where she could actually be refreshed. And so, again, it's not just asking the question for sake of trying to get someone to talk, but what are you going to do with that information? That's really building a map if you'll let it, And sometimes people say things just to be nice, nothing. But once you really kind of, watch, well, that's not my truth. I don't think it is nothing. I think there is something there that does, stir you up and you enjoy. So I'm gonna pursue after that, Does that make sense?
Asking questions, what is your favorite memory of a date or an activity that we did together? Sometimes we miss cues that our partners give us, or in the processing, we kind of maybe even change the narrative that we had about something, and things are very meaningful. And we need to take time to ask the question, what did you really enjoy? And almost on a regular basis be able to say, what was it like for you to experience whatever it was that you just went through? Maybe you just went to a big family event. After the event, being able to say, what was it like for you to hear the old stories, or for you to engage with those people, and how did that pull you back into your family of origin, or how did that offer to you a bridge into the future, and what can we do about it? I think sometimes if we don't pay attention to that, then we'll just go on in our normal life, and all of a sudden we'll be the people who are rewounding our spouse or our children or the people that we love, because we've not taken the time to intentionally find out what it is to actually live in their skin.
And not everything has a bow on it, because I'll tell you something, like Heather went to this conference a year or two ago, and it just ticked all the boxes, and it was an amazing time. She went with my daughter, and so because that was important to her, she saw to it that I could get to go to the conference a few weeks ago. And the conference was good, but it wasn't anything to write home about for me. But I knew that it was very important for her, because that conference had meant so much to her 2 years before. So you don't lie and pretend like the conference was awesome, but you have to kind of own that that's a real thing, that was something that now she carries some disappointment. And so I have to make sure that I was engaged the whole time I was there. I mean, I was really intentionally not just phoning it in, because this was a big deal to her as well as it was important to me. But then for us to be able to, like I said, everything has a bow on it. So, for us to discuss, well, there was good, but just maybe I was tired, or maybe this or whatever, just, so that I could, because I know her map, I know that was a very important thing. And I don't think it turned out exactly like she would have planned, but you know what I mean. But I definitely tried, and I recognize I want to give everything. But even if you do, doesn't mean it's going to have the bow on it, that it's all going to be perfect. But if you can then give some space to really understand that she might be disappointed, he might be disappointed, because that was something that, so it's no reflecting on you as your performance. That's your spouse doesn't give you your report card. God does, and he says you're accepted in the beloved. Good news, right? You all passed. But a lot of times we do get our report card for that, so we get very hurt if this person didn't have the same experience we had, or or if you failed to help them, enjoy the experience as much. And so, but I think just knowing that can help you verbalize those things. And so Heather and I had to, I think, kind of navigate that experience in a way that was not offensive.
And I think that also giving each other space to not have the exact same experience or the exact same approval. But there are times where in our relationship we allow each other to do that. Well, I would like to go and do this thing. Well, I really don't want to, but I want to be with you, so I will go and participate. But if you're going to go and participate and have a horrible face or like be upset about it the whole time, just allow your partner, pick a friend and go with them. And this idea of it's okay for us to have friends, our spouse, our partner doesn't have to meet all of our friendship needs. I mean, I think that we should allow each other off the hook to be able to say there are things that...
But then the flip side of that, I kind of enjoy sometimes when you'll go, I want you to go here with me today, and I'm going to need you to enjoy it.
And I'm going to need you to see what I see. I just tell her that.
It's taken us 28 years to get here, but I get where she's coming from, and you know what? I'm going to buckle
first
down.
Start,
I'm going to maybe
first class starts at 9.
Lay back on the sarcasm, and I'm going to, invest here. And so I think that, I totally agree with you that thing about friends. Sometimes people think once you're married, you have to be everyone's everything, and that's just not realistic. That's why we have a community of church believers and other people that we can be in fellowship with. But at the same time, there are some times where you just need your spouse, or you just really want your spouse, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's actually really beautiful. But I think that if you psychically think they're going to pick up on the fact that you really need them that day, you're setting them up and yourself for guaranteed failure. So just come right out and say, today I'm going to need you to go to do this, and I'm going to need you to enjoy it. And I believe that's a real fair thing.
And if you can't do that, then you can say, I really can't. It's hot, and you're going to make me walk around and look at the same guitar over and over again, and you're going to play the same riff, and you're going to ask me, how does this sound? And I'm going to say to you, this is all hypothetical. It sounds exactly like the 34th one that you picked up and played. And there, though, is for us an actual joy that we can do because we do love each other, for us to be able to laugh and go, no, I will do this, or no, I think you should take a friend who will really, really appreciate that. And for us to give each other the space to be able to do that. A few more of the questions that the Gottmans recommend that you start with to be able to ask and to be able to find maps is, what relative did you feel closest to as a child? If you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? What is your favorite childhood memory? When you need space to recover, where is that space? What are you currently worried about? What is your favorite sport, and has you ever played it? And what did you hope for the legacy of our marriage? Or what do you hope for the legacy of our marriage?
So again, if you come up at the end and want to write your email address, we can forward you that list. And so, it gives you something. And again, these aren't the be-all, end-all of questions.
And you could look them up,
They
too.
begin to, ask questions.
Some of them you already know. It's good to know. I'm sure you know what your partner's favorite ice cream is.
But
Everybody
with your
knows
children, you can begin to ask some
What's
more
my favorite
questions.
ice cream?
Your favorite ice cream?
Look at the panic. Look at the panic. Look at the panic.
The past few times you've ordered peanut butter. Do I win?
Here's the deal. There's no right answer for that because I don't love ice cream. So, I mean, for other people there would be. It was a trick. I just mean, though, sometimes you look at a question and you go, this didn't go up because this is not something that we, so don't look at the questions and go, I have to know these things. Sometimes
I was imprinting myself on you, and so I was going to say cookie dough.
Well, that is what you would choose, but not what. So we all know that. And then in the situation, if one of you has a lot more knowledge about the other one, maybe you need to stop talking and gives time to start asking the questions.
That's a good word. Yeah. With our children, what if we did begin to ask these kind of questions, even of adult children, that you really just, right? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
How would that allow someone to be really seen?
Oh.
To be honored for something that they are trying to do or what they are endeavoring to put forward to, even asking something, especially when young people who are starting careers or starting their life and they're building things, asking questions. What is it like for you right now? Are you overwhelmed? Are you happy with the way that this is going? Do you need extra support? And those are good questions to ask people.
Just by way of illustration, and just to celebrate, really, Tim and Courtney are buying a house.
That's so exciting. Let's be excited for them.
Their first house
Let's
ever.
be excited for them.
And of course, the house together, they'll celebrate their first anniversary in their new house. It's a dream house they're able to get and everything. And you'd have to be pretty much blind, but for me to be friends with them and love them, I could see the joy, and I share the joy, And so, we want to celebrate that with them. We want to get involved. How can we help? And how, tell us about that. And that's exciting. And then just to, as I was listening, they've both had experiences where family hasn't not, blood family has not been as excited as they'd hoped they'd be, and that's kind of the, there's always someone that rains on your parade or maybe doesn't do, but for us as friends and family, we can be there. And so, again, it's not just about your marriage, but it's about really observing and just being aware, like, that because I love them, I approach that situation differently. It becomes a priority for me because I say that they're a priority for me, And so I pray about that. I think about that. I try to reserve effort and time to help if I can, And so so let's be for our friends a word of encouragement, because that's a big undertaking, as many of you have done. You know how scary and risky and nervous that can be, but also what a beautiful opportunity to stop having to pay somebody else's rent and mortgage and be able to have your own. That's really a great breakthrough in a family financially, as well as just.
And it's a beautiful place to start having memories that we curate and say, this is where the events are going to happen that we offer to the world. This is where we are going to offer our best selves to each other and to other people. And this is where we're going to have a table. And at our table, what are the plans that we have? I think that one of the things that you should do if you're a follower of Christ is ask the question, what is our family plan for radical hospitality? I'm just throwing that out with you. That's not on the Gottman page, but I think it's on this idea of what would it look like for us to be hospitable. It causes conflict for some of us. Like, if I'm going to be hospitable, it's a lot of work. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm helping, I'm trying, but I have a way that I want to be hospitable. And it's sometimes not as easy for my family to go with my way of hospitality. And by that I mean I'm not just generous. I want it to look a certain way, and that means there's a lot of work involved for everyone. And so I want this plan for radical hospitality, but then I also want it to look a certain way. And so being aware of the love maps of what this is going to cost us. What does this mean? And then for me to understand that, I need to take it down like 100 notches. And to be able to relax and to be able to make an atmosphere where that is. But we can learn and grow by paying attention to the maps for each other. What is it like for someone to experience me when I am anxious? What is it like for someone to experience for me when I am disappointed or when I am grieving? And those are things that would enrich us and would help our mapping.
Yeah, so good. Thank you.
Yeah, you want to pray over us?
Father, we come to you in Jesus' name, and I thank you for tonight. I thank you for the things that you have spoken into our relationships and into our lives, and we ask you to help us retain that information that's from you. And Father, we lift up our relationships to you and ask you for the mercy of God to be upon them. I ask you, Father, to just strengthen each marriage here, that we would be resilient, we would be forgiving, we would be grace-filled, we would be kind, we would drive out anger and selfish ambitions and self-centeredness. And I thank you, Father God, for just what you're doing in the lives, that you're creating legacies in this room that will affect children and grandchildren and several generations of the Lord would tarry. And I thank you for this, Father, in advance. And I just speak blessing over each saint of God in Jesus' name. Everybody said?
Amen.
Amen.
May you go home and draw some beautiful love maps.
Yeah.
The following was a sermon presented at First Love Church in Ocala, Florida. If you'd like to know more about our church or Pastors Dennis and Heather Drake, you can find out on the web at firstlovechurch.org. If you'd like to help us continue the work that we're doing, you can donate at firstlovechurch.org.